I'm going to divide this conversation with you into 3 parts. In the first part, I'm going to share what I believe to be a problem with you. I'm going to talk about how we got to this point in time today, economically speaking. And we're going to look at the industries here in Central Florida that have gotten us to this point. And I think there's going to be a problem that emerges. In the second segment, I'm going to talk about a potential solution. I'm going to talk about a new and emerging economic paradigm that's happening not just across the country, but also right here in Metro Orlando. And we're going to talk about that. And in the third segment, I'm going to share with you what I believe to be an extraordinary opportunity. The opportunity to take that emerging paradigm and translate it into regional prosperity, ensuring that ourselves, our families, our businesses, and our community remains a vibrant place to live and to do business. So when we think about this innovation economy, when Michigan State looked at it and said, well, what do we do here in Michigan? How do we participate in it? They said, well, we have to recognize that these people, these talented, smart people that can work anywhere in the world, they choose a location first. And then they look for a job. In other words, they look for a location that can help them produce ideas. And then they decide what they're going to go do. That's a total change from what we're used to. Let me show you something. And this is where Blaine and I have spent a lot of time, and we think it's pretty darn interesting. I hope you do too. When we look at the innovation assets, these are the assets that help people produce ideas, and we try to cluster them geographically. We find that they generally occur in an area east of downtown Orlando, pretty much between the University of Central Florida and Orlando International Airport. Now that makes sense because what is UCF in the idea economy? What is it in the innovation economy? It's a great idea generator. It clusters smart people together. It supports an entrepreneurial network. It has basic research and development whose ideas might end up as a company someday. So that makes sense to us. And then what is OIA? OIA is a global connector. You can go from OIA to any city in the nation nonstop. 88 cities in the nation nonstop. So look at that collection of assets. Now that's a balance sheet for innovation. That's a balance sheet for innovation. And when you look back, what happened was we drew this blue box around that collection of assets. And so when you think about the types of jobs that have come alongside those assets, think about this. 1 in every 5 people and adults that are employed in this blue box are engaged in technology or education. Now that is very different than the rest of Central Florida. And so the bad news is we've lost 100,000 jobs, 39,000 of which are in the construction industry. The good news is that over the years we've been able to build up a mass of jobs in these innovative industries. Just in these 3 industries, 60,000 with 30,000 more to come, 90,000 jobs. So that's a very good thing here in Metro Orlando. So if you do those kinds of jobs around those kinds of innovation assets, I wonder what kind of people flock to those jobs. Now you have 450,000 people that have characteristics consistent with innovative industries. They're younger. They're actually more diverse than Metro Orlando. Now Metro Orlando itself is diverse. The average diversity index in the country is 61. Now that 61 means in the country, if you were to walk up to any 2 random people on the street, the percentage chance that they would be of different racial or ethnic backgrounds is 61% in the country. So Metro Orlando, the average is 67.9%. In this innovation zone, it's actually higher, 68.7%. White-collar jobs, higher. Household income, $10,000 per home, higher. And again, look at the education. Across the board, higher levels of education, significantly higher levels of education than the rest of the MSA. And we know that income is highly correlated to education. In fact, that relationship has been expanding over the past decades. The more education you have, the higher the income. The less education you have, unfortunately, the lower the income. And so we now have this teeming mass of highly educated, creative, diverse, young people, relatively young, living in this blue box in Central Florida, this innovation zone. And they are engaged in industries that have had different job creation characteristics than the rest of Metro Orlando. These industries have been hiring over the past several years, and they continue to hire. So the question is, we now know we have this group of innovation assets. how do we make them as productive as possible? How do we ensure that Metro Orlando is competitive in this new innovation economy? Kiplinger said if you're going to rank cities today in this innovation economy, you rank them on three things: smart people, great ideas, and collaboration. The ability for those people and those ideas to mix together. And it goes across industry, academia, and government. And so Austin, Texas ended up on the top of the list. Now, Austin is the home to the University of Texas. That's Michael Dell looking over his facility there. We all know the story of Dell Computers. And I want you to look at these figures. Now, with respect to all of the indicators of a creative, smart, diverse population that's needed, we look exactly like Austin, Texas in our innovation zone. Isn't that remarkable? It's amazing. The only difference between us, our innovation zone, and the #1 rated city in the country for economic vitality and job creation over the next decade is our size. That means if we're going to take advantage of this, what I think is a tremendous opportunity, we have been given a set of innovation assets that is not present anyplace else in the Southeast. It's not present anyplace else in the state. And so how are we as a community going to take advantage of that? How are we going to take advantage of our advantages? And how are we going to take this set of innovation assets and compete every day with those cities that I just saw? I think when this growth industry, which I've been employed in, collapsed, that's pretty shocking. And so the question is, how are we going to respond to that? And our friend Paul Romer, as has been repeated by Rahm Emanuel, says, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So are we, as participants in our Metro Orlando economy, as leaders of the community, as peoples whose families and livelihoods depend on the future vitality of Metro Orlando, going to respond? Are we going to say it's a crisis? We have to decide collectively as a group whether we are going to join together and do something about Metro Orlando's competitiveness. Because many of our companies are competitive, but on many fronts, Metro Orlando is not. Not when we start to compare ourselves against the Austins and the San Franciscos and the Boulders of the world. When we compare ourselves against the Las Vegas of the world, sure, we're competitive. They have a bad housing market, we have a bad housing market. They have tourists, we have tourists. But that is not what's going to drive our economy forward. That's not the competitive set that we're looking to be a part of. And so the question becomes, are we going to do something about it? Not sit here and talk about it, not say, oh, I wish. Do something about it. You can't market the community as an innovation center until the community itself believes it and sees itself that way. They have to believe that we are engaged in this competition for smart, talented people. They have to believe that we have these innovative industries that we are going to grow. And they have to see themselves as supporting that effort. And I'm telling you right now today, if all of us in the room don't understand the story, and we're some of the top people in business and civic leadership in our area, then it's not hard to understand that our population doesn't understand it. And so a movement, an opportunity to come together and join together will ensure, and it will mean, that we start to tell this story differently to our own population and then to the outside world. Because the bottom line is, it's the economic realities that will drive our future prosperity. Frankly, the politicians should listen to the economic realities, but it's on us as business leaders to define what those economic priorities are that our politicians can take their cues from. And so when we start to think about our area and where our innovation assets are, let's just take the biotech cluster. So we've got to think, how do we make that biotech cluster as competitive as possible? Well, one thing you would know is that you've got to link together the assets that it interacts with, those innovation assets. Where are the innovation assets in our biotech clusters? If there's one thing Disney World does well, it's create experiences for people, right? And I think the Walt Disney Company knows that this community has to be magnetic. People have to feel like they have a good experience here. They do it for a week. Walt Disney wants you to come back every year for a week because you had a great experience. We need to do that for a lifetime so people are here for the rest of their lives, have a good experience. So can we take that same narrative, that story, and start to talk about Orlando in a different way? As a community tomorrow, for the jobs of tomorrow. And that's where I want to start the conversation today.
I think what we've accomplished today is the beginning of an economic recovery strategy. And I think we have a lot of organizations that are working extremely hard EDC, all our chambers, my region, and I think what I see coming out of this is all representatives from all these groups coming together, and we have one Metro Orlando economic recovery strategy. And I think everything is in place to make this happen.
Hey, Jim, Brian Walters with the Metro Orlando Economic Development Commission, and as you know, I've been here for about a month and a half. And to feed on all your comments are spot on, by the way. It's a great presentation, and I like how you've articulated that. To feed on the Disney comment, the chair of the Economic Development Commission right now is Meg Crofton. Mm-hmm. And the organization has recently gone through a leadership charter. Dr. Vogel sits on that board as well. It's a cross-section of political leadership in the community, the education community, the business community. And they've gone through this process called leadership charter to say, okay, we need a strategy. We need to diversify this economy. You have the CEO of Disney World saying we need to diversify the economy past tourism, build on the infrastructure that you've outlined.
Education is critical. And so, your ideas about making sure the community understands where we're going and what we need to do, I think will help the community decide to support education, and that there is this very direct causal link between education and the growth of these types of industries.
I really appreciate everybody coming here today. You all, as I said earlier, are the business and civic leaders of this community. And when Blaine and I started to look at this stuff and say, man, this is interesting, we have got to have a conversation about it, and we turned to all of you and said, would you have a conversation with us? You responded to that call. And so no matter what happens from here on out, and whether we have a movement and it looks like most of us are ready to do something, I really appreciate you guys coming and being part of that conversation.